Hi everyone, good evening. How are you doing? I'm happy to see we are tuned in. We've started a few minutes past time, but it's still okay. I'm excited to see that we are excited to be here. We are learning. So many people are saying hello, hello, hello. They are saying they are present, tuned in, ready to learn. If you were here yesterday, you can say second day in the chat so that we see who was here yesterday and they are with us today as we wait for people to join. Hi, Tabitha. Hi, Josie. Karetoto. Yes, you were all here yesterday. Rachel, you can also tell us where you're watching us from. Even as we continue to join and others are joining us, tell us where you're watching us from. It's another day. This is the Rapid Healing Challenge 2.0. We had 1.0 last year, so this is 2.0, and this is day 2. For those of us who were here yesterday, I'm curious to know what your takeaway for yesterday was. If you weren't here yesterday, I am also hoping that maybe you watched our video from yesterday. So let me see, what have we learned from yesterday up to today? You can put it in the chat. I'm seeing a lot of people saying second day, second day. This is exciting. We are all very ready to learn something new, to unlearn, to relearn stuff that we already know. So if your second day, you are here on day 2, karibu sana. I'm seeing Priska saying she's watching us from Roysambu. Wanjiro Joroge, yay, day 2. We have Lucy from Nakuru, Pauline. She's saying it's day 2. She's watching us from Nakuru. Caro Chomba from Mombasa. This is your second day. Let me see what you learned yesterday. And if you have a friend that you want to invite, please tag them. Let them know that we have already started so that they don't miss out. So let me see what you learned from yesterday. See whether there's something you took away, what you thought about it. Wow. Welcome, Masi Kataka. She's saying she's watching us from Kakamega. This is her first day. So karibu sana, Masi. If you didn't make it yesterday, you can watch our video from yesterday to see what we learned. Yesterday, we had a very awesome lady here, Coach Paps Wanyugi. So if you didn't watch Coach Paps yesterday, please go to that video. The same link we used yesterday. If you click on it, you will find our video from yesterday there. So welcome, welcome, welcome. Priska is saying my takeout from yesterday was feed the child in you. Yes, pay attention to the little girl in you. Mercy is her first day from Malindi. So Mercy, if you weren't here yesterday, please watch our video from yesterday. We are here. We want to have very, very candid conversation. So invite your friends. Lucy is saying that yesterday she learned my life is not a stone. I learned to embrace my inner child. Yes, don't keep your feelings frozen in there, your emotions frozen. Learn to get in touch with that inner child. Kagweria learned to stop looking at the door. I like that. Yes, stop looking at the door. Nobody is coming to your rescue. You are your own rescue. So yes, Kagweria, I'm happy that you're here today. I'm seeing a lot of people who are here yesterday and they are back here today. So this is amazing. It's really awesome. So tonight we have another very awesome lady that I want to introduce to us. Her name is Carol. Carol Waithera is a 33-year-old mother of 2 boys. She is 33 years old. She's a mother of 2 boys and a counseling psychologist. So Carol is a counseling psychologist. So if you're looking for a counselor, she's also one. And she's here tonight to tell us about attachment styles and how they affect us in relationships. And Carol, this is one of the topics that she handles so well. So I am sure that tonight you are going to learn a lot. You're going to learn a lot, and there will be a lot of takeaways for you tonight. So without taking so much of her time again, I want to introduce Carol. Carol, are you there? 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 Carol, are you there?
Hi. Hi, can you hear me?
Sorry
Hello.
for that.
Okay. Hi.
Yes, Carol, you can take it away.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the wonderful introduction, and I hope you can hear me clearly before I proceed. Can you hear me clearly? Hi, Ruth. Can you hear me clearly? Okay, I'll proceed. Um, so as introduced, my name is Caroline Waithira. My preferred name is Carol. I'm a counseling psychologist by profession, among many other hats that I wear. So today we will speak about attachment styles. And if you're joining day two, it's going to be a good build up on our inner child. But if it's your first day, you still are going to learn a lot from it. And what do we mean when we talk about attachment styles? This is basically how you relate with people in relationships and how we respond emotionally to others in regard to our behavior and interactions with them. So, how are our attachment styles formed? Have we ever asked ourselves, so this is how I show up in relationships? Why do I show up like this? And it's not limited only to um, romantic relationships. It's how you relate even in your friendships, how you show up even amongst your siblings, how do you show up even with your colleagues, how do you show up, above all of those, the main one being in relationships, in romantic relationships. So these attachment styles are normally formed in childhood, and it's how our caregivers treat us during childhood that form or shape these attachment styles. So I prefer using the word caregiver as opposed to parent because I'm sensitive to the fact that there are people who've been raised by their grandmas, their aunties. Um, for those who are raised with parents who are busy working, maybe both were career parents, they've been raised by the nannies. So for the purposes of that, I'll use the word caregivers to stand for all those people who are there. And also over time, I've noticed that you might question how you attach. Why is your attachment style like this? Yet my parents showed up like this. But then for a good chunk of time, for example, maybe your mom leaves at 8, comes back at 5 p.m. So the larger chunk of the day you end up spending with the nanny. So that caregiver will influence your attachment style. So what do children require from their caregivers so that we can attach in a healthy way or in a functional way? Children require our caregivers to see us. We need to be seen. We need to be heard. We count on our caregivers to regulate us emotionally. That's why it's funny when you find a caregiver scolding the child and asking them, "Mbona una behave kama mtoto?" But you are a child. That's how a child is supposed to act. So we count on them to help us to regulate ourselves emotionally. And when we look at the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, other than the basic needs, we find that there's something we call love and belonging amongst the needs that we require as a human being as we are working towards actualization. So as we work, as you find that love and belonging, this is also something that's very crucial for a child as they are growing up. So amongst the attachment styles, we have secure, we have anxious, we have avoidant, and then we have a combination which is normally called disorganized, where someone shows up in the two attachment styles. So how are they formed? I'd start by explaining the secure one. So you find that someone who grows up to be a secure adult in relationships, they grew up in an environment where the caregiver very present, was very present, physically, emotionally, mentally, and all the needs that they had.
It's all right. Let's wait for Carol to adjust herself.
Hi, sorry about that. Sorry about that.
Hi, hi, Carol.
Yeah, sorry. So I'll we'll go back to the secure. We're talking about the secure. So you find that the caregivers in this situation, they tend to the child fully and all round. So how does this look like? This looks like a child needs to be soothed. They are soothed. This looks like a child needs to eat. They are attended to. This looks like a child who needs to sleep. They are attended to. So it doesn't mean that there's a caregiver who is perfect. No, we don't have a caregiver who's perfect because no human being is perfect. But this parent strikes that balance to be as consistent as possible and to cater to this child's emotional, physical, physiological needs and all round. So you find that as an adult, how do they show up? You find that these adults, they trust in relationships, they are independent in relationships. What do I mean by that? They can trust that their spouses, they can trust that their partners can be able to have a life of their own, and they have a life of their own, and then they come together and become something and have a partnership. So that's ways in which you find that a secure person will show up. Also, they understand the essence of time and space. They understand that I need space, you need space, and that doesn't mean that we are not okay because they're secure enough. I'll take you a little bit back to maybe us as children, or if we are already parents, you find that a secure child, it's easy to explain to them, hi, mommy is going to work and I'll come back later. They might maybe hug you a little bit longer, be a little bit sad, but they understand that mom is going, but she's going to come back. Hajaenda kabisa. So even in adulthood, they'll show up like that. They understand that I may not be able to access my spouse at this moment in time as much as I'd like to, but it's okay because maybe they need time, they need to do this, they may be away from me. Um, and being independent does not mean that they don't seek help. They are okay with being vulnerable enough to seek help. They are okay with, talking, having those uncomfortable conversations because back then in childhood, the emotional needs were tended to. It was okay to be vulnerable. It was okay to be sad. It was okay to express your emotions and not be shamed for it, not being shut down because you're expressing yourself. So in relationships they'll show up like that. It's not a big deal for them to have, to communicate about their needs. They are comfortable with that. And you'll find that they relate maybe in a context of maybe in a work situation or in a friendship. They relate with others well. It's not very hard for them to relate with other people because they don't have, their worldview is that, this is a human being like me and I can actually communicate, I can talk to them. They are not closed up. They don't have the fear of, what if I do this and for you to end it behind my back? No. That does not mean they're not cautious. No. Just that they have very healthy, they relate very healthily. They have healthy social skills. And lastly, they have very healthy boundaries. Being able to relate with other people openly and being vulnerable with other people does not mean that you don't have boundaries. And how does teach or show a child to have boundaries? We reinforce our children's boundaries by telling them that it's okay to say no if you're not comfortable with something. It's okay to speak up your mind because I think, especially in our generation, it was very common to be forced to say hi to uncle. Salimia uncle, utaki kuhaga auntie yako. That is a way of actually, crossing our children's boundaries because it looked like a show of respect, but maybe you found the child in a state where maybe they are not okay, they are breaking down, but they have to wipe their tears and go say it to this very important person. So you're showing this child that their needs are not important, and it's okay for them to go against their wishes and go against their boundaries because there's somebody who needs to be pleased. So because it was okay for them to have time out, to have that space, and they could express themselves with that freedom without being shamed. Now, as adults, it's not hard for them to set those boundaries because, as we'll see as we proceed with the anxious type, we'll see that as adults, most of the time, you're not able to set boundaries because there's some shame attached to it and the feeling of maybe I'll not be loved. So when you go back to childhood, you find that it comes from that. It comes from a place where your boundaries were violated as a child, and you felt like for me to belong, for me to be loved, I need to break a bit of my boundaries. I need to push them a bit so that I can belong, so that I can be accepted. Um, so we go to the second category, which is the insecure. So under the insecure, we have the anxious attachment style, and sometimes it's called preoccupied, anxious preoccupied. So how is it formed in childhood? You find that first is characterized by a lot of fear and like it's a deep fear for abandonment. At the core of it, there's a deep fear for abandonment. So how do these caregivers show up for these children so that they end up being anxious or preoccupied adults? You find that these adults tend to be very inconsistent. Nitapeana example ya maybe most of us experienced this. African moms anaingia tu, mkimuona tu kama mjaosha vyombo, hata kama mmeosha vyombo, you start looking for ni nini, are the seats okay, hebu zima TV. There was always some sense of anxiety because anaweza kuja leo akiwa na stress za job, aingie kama ameanza kupigiwa makelele na ameanza kuchapwa kutoka tu kwa mlango, or anaweza kuja leo na fruits hatapiga makelele, so you don't know what to expect, so it puts you on edge. Haujui what to expect today. So you see these inconsistencies, how do they now manifest in adulthood and even in the child at that point, because the anxiety does not start in adulthood. I'm only explaining how it's formed and how it manifests in adulthood, but even in our children, if we have been maybe inconsistent. And something I would like us to note, all these attachment styles, the parents they don't do them intentionally, because you find that sometimes the parents are showing up how their parents showed up for them. So it's not intentional, because I can imagine maybe you have parents here and you realize you've seen these characteristics in your children and it can make you maybe feel guilty, but no, it's not intentional. You're just parenting because there's no guidebook per se. So you're parenting how you best know how to, and sometimes you parent from our own traumas if we've not done the work. So you find that when the child is not sure what to do with, they are not very sure. In adulthood, you find that they tend to be people pleasers and they lack boundaries, and they tend to be very clingy and needy, and they also need a lot of validation. So remember, we said there's a deep fear of abandonment. So in adulthood, even in friendships, they tend to attach very fast. So these are the people that you will meet, and within 2 weeks, they've already said, I love you. They want to define whatever it is. You're still figuring out the favorite color. You're not sure if it's mauve or red or whatever color it is. But they're already, because they attach very fast. So because of the deep fear of abandonment that they have deep within them, they need you to validate them constantly. So it will come out as neediness and clinginess, because they may communicate. I don't know if there's a word like over communicate, but they may communicate within a very short period of span of time. Like within an hour, you might have maybe several paragraphs of messages, and if they call you twice and you're not picking, then they're followed by text. Like you can even feel the panic and the anxiety because they're wondering, ama huyu amechoka na mimi, ama ameniacha, ama nilikosea. So there's that constant fear. They operate from that a lot. And the beauty about all these things is that after we become aware, we can work towards becoming secure. It's not something that's cast on stone, that's how you will be for the rest of your life. No, just bringing it to the awareness and understanding, I show up like that, or understanding, so this anxiety. Sometimes actually people with the anxious type or the preoccupied type might be misdiagnosed to have ADHD, because also people with ADHD will tend to have a lot of anxiety and be jittery and being here and there. So it might be easily be misdiagnosed for ADHD. So this hunger for validation and these things, what happens if you're in a relationship with someone like this? Coach Paps told us yesterday that we need to take responsibility for our healing, and that is true. But what happens if you find yourself in a relationship or in a friendship, or you have a colleague who's like that, or you notice that you have a 7-year-old or 10-year-old or 15-year-old who actually shows up like that? So if you realize that they show up like that, it would be important as you're bringing it to their awareness, maybe through therapy or any other avenues, or just bring it to the awareness that they show up like that. Some things that you can do if this is someone who is in your life, you can not to not to reinforce that behavior, but if maybe you're going for a work meeting and you know you may not be able to communicate in the next 2 hours and they might get jittery, maybe you can drop a text that says, hi, I'll be in a meeting and it might take longer than it usually does. So being good at communicating, or maybe going an extra mile with the communication, so that there's no much room for the anxiety. And you can imagine, if maybe this is not how you show up, you can imagine that state, and you can imagine uh, how what's the word, it can how helpless and that situation, it can put you in a very in a place where you might not even be very functional. So as they do the work, you can support them by actually communicating well, so there's no much room for the guesswork. So it's a way of at least trying to validate that. And if it's in a relationship, it's very important to actually have a very well defined relationship, because at least it sets, this person understands where they stand in your life, and they don't have to constantly guess and question themselves. So that, just having very well defined um, relationships. And on the other end, because of them having those, people pleasing tendencies, and them something else I'd like to mention, the people pleasing tendencies come from the fact that this caregiver always comes home in an inconsistent way. So what the children learn is that I need to predict. So in case they come in a bad mood today, I know what to do. So that predicting, and during that whole process, the children abandon their own needs, and they realize that, oh, so if I predict she's in a bad mood and this is what I do, I'm able to, make her happy or make him happy. Also, this is how it works. So because of that, you find now as adults, they are not able to put their needs before. So they tend to people please and not have boundaries. So if you're on the receiving end of experiencing an anxious person, sometimes they may push your boundaries. They don't notice they're pushing your boundaries, because of the lack of boundaries on their part, they may actually push you as well. So if this is someone it's important for you to reinforce boundaries. And the beauty about reinforcing boundaries, when I reinforce boundaries, it mirrors on your side, and you realize, oh, so she can actually say no. So it gives power to the other person. So it's not a bad thing. So if you have experienced someone who's like this, it's important for you to, as much as you're supporting them and maybe sometimes validating and communicating better, also set your own boundaries. Be very keen to set your own boundaries. And maybe you can type and chat and ask questions about the two that we've talked about, and seek clarification as we look at the next two. So the other one is the avoidant one. So sometimes it's called the dismissive. Why is it called the dismissive? Because that's how avoidant people literally show up. They tend to be very emotionally dismissive. So how is it formed in childhood? You find that they might actually have had a lot of things that were consistent. They might have things that were provided for them. However, emotionally, there was a huge gap. The caregiver was either too strict, and there was no time for crying and being a baby. There was no time for that. There was no time for that. And maybe we've experienced this. Maybe you're talking, or you're doing something, or you're stressed, you're thinking about something, then the baby comes in, mommy, mama, daddy, auntie, nimegongwa sijui na nani. Then you're dismissed, and mostly it will sound like, wewe ukigongwa ulikuwa unafanya nini, or you're dismissed, or tutaongea na wewe baadaye, huoni nafanya kitu. So they're dismissed. So what happens in adulthood? they show up as people who put up very high walls. How are their walls formed? Every time this child comes to you with this level, very high level of vulnerability, and then they are pushed away, the pain they experience makes them put up a wall because they realize, by the way, my feelings are not important. And every time I speak up, every time I communicate something that is hurting me, could be physical, could be emotional. And remember something, the way we perceive things as children, because of our emotional ability and emotional maturity, is not the same way an adult would. That's why we are told to go down to the child's level. So something as simple as, mami nilikatwa huku kabisa, unakumbuka hii alikatwa last week, but they're just seeking attention at that moment in time, and you feel like you don't have the ability to do that. It may look like a very small thing, but that's enough to put a child in that state. So, and sometimes it doesn't take much. It just takes a pole, and then they go back playing. It just takes that. But that's enough. That's big enough for a child to actually build a wall. So they build a wall, pole, 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 pole. So I don't know, maybe if you've experienced these people where you go for a date, the date is amazing, unaongea fiti kabisa. Then you go home, and maybe after saying, oh, I got home safe, thank you for the date, blah, 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 and that. After that, they don't communicate, and you wonder, that's odd. Maybe the next time they communicate is after a week, or they actually don't. Or after several dates, they go cold, and you wonder what's wrong. Most probably you find that's an avoidant person, and it's because maybe they started feeling a sense of safety, and they're a bit vulnerable, and then they realize, the last time I felt, they go back to that childhood memory. The last time I was vulnerable and I, spoke my mind or expressed myself, I was shut down. So this is probably what's gonna happen. So what they do, they put a wall up. So characteristics of these people is, the first one is obviously putting that wall up. Literally, you can feel it. There's a wall. Nasikia huyu mtu tunaongea, but there's something I can't access. There's a level I can't access with this person. Then they tend to need space. They tend to need a lot of space, because them having space is their way of reclaiming safety. You remember the anxious person, there's a strong fear of abandonment. For this one is a sense of safety. So they need that safety. So for them to be safe, they need, that space. Then also, because of this, chances are they were raised by an avoidant parent as well. So this parent maybe would say, people are not to be trusted, watu si wazuri. They constantly kept saying that. So they know people are not to be trusted. So most of the time they don't trust people. They're always suspicious of people's motives, and they always are wondering, what are you up to? It might be a very good deed, no strings attached, but they don't believe that. Also, they tend to feel like, because of their need for space, they tend to feel like relationships suffocate them. And by this I mean romantic relationships and friendships. I'm very familiar with this attachment style because I identify with it as much as I'm working towards becoming secure. So we tend to feel so overwhelmed with, feel like, we hang out today, you want us to hang out tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. When do I get to rest? You feel like we need the rest. Remembering while anxious, now they would want to hang out with you today, tomorrow, the day after. They need that closeness. For us, it's like avoidant people is the opposite. Also, they tend to be very emotionally unavailable and distant. Remember, we said they are called also dismissive, avoidant or dismissive. So they are emotionally unavoidable and distant. Because you remember in the beginning, we said that our caregivers, they teach us how to regulate ourselves emotionally. So if they are the same people who are shutting us down emotionally, if they are the same people who are crushing our vulnerability, how are we able to access that? It becomes very hard as adults. So they are emotionally unavailable, and it's a way of also protecting themselves. It's a way of seeking safety. It's safe for them. It's good like that. It's like, let us operate on a very superficial level. Tusiende ndani sana, tusijuane sana. It's not necessary. So that's about avoidant people, and they seek a lot of independence. So there's something I'd like to explain briefly about independence. I'll explain it from an African psychology perspective. We are Africans, and we work very well when we're in synergy with other human beings. And that's not only African, even human beings. We heal in societies, we heal in communities being together. So there's nothing wrong with being independent, but it's best when we work with interdependence. So let's look at it from a point of an anxious person tends to be quite dependent on the other person emotionally, the closeness, physical closeness, and all that. Then the avoidant person across tends to be quite independent, and they're like, I can do it on my own. You know, see lazima, I don't have to engage these people. Some tend to be loners as well and isolate themselves a lot physically and also emotionally. So in between, there's a very good balance where we call interdependence, and in local terms that we might understand is Ubuntu. So when we practice interdependence, we are able to be, yes, independent beings, and we're able to depend on other people for some things. But at the core of it all, we are able to experience interdependence. So it's very healthy. It's very healthy, and that's something that we should all strive to work towards. Interdependence. You know, I am because you are, so we are able to relate from that point of view. You can put up your questions or comments on the chat box as we proceed to the last one.
Do you
Hi,
want me to
Lucy.
read them for you?
Yeah, if you let me explain the last. Are there many?
I'm seeing 3 questions.
Yeah, we can. I can take them before we go to the last one.
Okay, Brenda is asking,
Mm,
can someone have more than one, say, anxious avoidant partner? Brenda, I
yes.
hope this question is, do you understand the question, Carol?
Yeah. She's asking if someone can show up avoidantly and anxiously, and that's the last one that we'll talk about, the disorganized one. So I'll
All
answer it
right.
as I explained. Yeah, the fourth
Then
one.
someone, Kagwiria is asking, can we say
Mm.
avoidance connect and withdraw like in a cyclic way?
Yes, I do. I'll explain that when I talk about something we call the avoidant anxious trap. Mm,
Okay.
mm.
Uh, Let me see the other question. I identify with the avoidant attachment. Okay. Do attachment styles impact personalities? That is Lydia.
Mhm.
Do
Yeah,
attachment styles impact personalities?
I'll respond to Lydia because the next two are something that I've prepared to talk about. So I'll answer them as I continue with the presentation. So
Then
the
I guess
sorry.
we can proceed then.
Okay, so I'll answer Lydia and then we proceed. So, how can it impact our personality? It can, because this is how you show up mostly in most of your relationships. So, a bigger chunk of your personality will be defined by that. So if I am avoidant, it will show up in very many ways. Utapata job, staki kuengage watu sana because I feel like they're gonna fail me. So I want it to do on my own. Of course, it will impact on my social skills and how I relate with my workmates. If at home I'm withdrawn, or if I'm anxious, I may tend to call everyone, be in everyone's business, and sometimes there are people. So yes, it can affect your personality. It has a huge impact on your personality and how you show up. I hope I've answered your question. So to answer Brenda's question, we go to the next one, which is quite interesting. So the third one is the combination, which is the fearful. It's normally called the fearful avoidant or disorganized. So this is where this person has a combination of both. So how is it formed? This is formed mostly. I use the word mostly because it doesn't have to happen to everyone, but mostly you find that the caregivers were abusive. Physical abuse, emotional abuse, verbal abuse, there was abuse. Look at it from a point where in a home where maybe the man we've heard of these stories where baba akikuja akiwa amelewa atachapa kila mtu. Kama kuna mtoto analia, kama kuna mtoto hajalala, mama wote wanachapwa. Then there are days he'll come, he's not drunk. And I'm sorry for using men. It doesn't mean that it's only men. There are even women who can do the same. The then he comes when he's not drunk, ako sawa, ameketi, amerelax, doesn't even talk a lot. So, and then give me a second.
That's okay. Let's keep the questions coming. As Carol comes back, I'm seeing a lot of questions here. Apart from caregivers being inconsistent, in what other ways do they show up as? I think avoidance is me. People just overwhelm me. I prefer being alone. Who can I trust? Me. So Carol will come and help us address these issues. Yes, she's back.
Okay. Sorry, guys, mommy duties. Poleni. I had to tend to the boys a bit. The disorganized ones, because of this environment that looks like that, there are days where there are fights, there are days where there are no fights. They live in constant fear. So it's a combination of there's a fear. You remember we talked about the anxious one having a deep fear for abandonment, and then we have this avoidant person who wants space. So you can imagine a combination of the two, and they'll show up as such. They'll show up as such in relationships. So they want commitment, but they have a deep rooted fear for commitment. So they want love, but they don't want love. So you can imagine how this person would show up today and show up tomorrow. And the saddest thing about this is also a type that people can heal from, but it might take a longer time compared to maybe someone who's purely avoidant or someone who's purely anxious. And you find that they tend to you'll find that as they show up in this relationship, there's a very high chance that they may show up abusively. So they might be the ones who are being abused, or they might be the abusers. And we're looking at abuse from a emotional, physical, verbal point of view. So it's an all-round perspective. So they also tend to have a lack of balance because they are not very well emotionally regulated. They may be too sexual. We've talked about the violence, and then they also have a difficulty regulating themselves in the relationship. And by regulating themselves in relationship, it's in general. Because you can imagine someone who's waking up today and they're extremely obsessed with you, and they just want you to be around, and they cannot understand that you're not around. And then a day after that, they text you that they want a breakup, and yeah, no explanation. And then so you can imagine how overwhelming this cycle can be, not only for the people that are around them, but also for themselves. Because I can imagine they don't know how why am I showing up like this, or what is. I'm sure there's that feeling of something is really off. Something is really off, but they can be helped by doing their work and just understanding and unlearning those things. But it's quite some work. Especially you can imagine if somebody has been in a cycle of being abusive and perpetrating this cycle in 1, 2, 3 relationships, and not only in romantic relationship, but also um, in the workplace. It might also, because I can imagine when I'm describing it, maybe kuna mtu anaona no wonder huyu mtu job anakuwa hivi, or a certain friend that you can't figure out. Today they are amazing, they love you with their all. Tomorrow they don't want anything to do with you. The other day they're insulting you. So you can imagine how overwhelming that can be. So quite it's a sad one. It's a sad one because other than the abuse, there's also a lot of neglect. There's a lot of emotional neglect. So there's a lot of things that this inner child would need to they need to go back to a very they need to go back to a very young age and unpack all these things. And sometimes you find that for this kind of attachment style, it might come from not only one caregiver. What do I mean? Umelelewa na shosho at some point, then you are taken to a certain auntie, then kidogo you are taken to a certain uncle because maybe a parent died or a parent wasn't able, or kulikuwa na a divorce that was nasty and parents are pulling each other. So kidogo uko na mama, kidogo uko na baba, at some point you're the grandma. So you can imagine picking all these, and it's a literal cocktail. But that doesn't mean that there's no help. We believe that when we talk about using a humanistic approach, that we came as a clean slate, and we feel that slate. So it's possible. It's possible. It just needs more patience. It just needs more work, and might take a longer period of time. So I'd like to respond to the second question, where I'm sure she can, whoever else can clarify if I got it right, but asking about the cycle. Yeah, it's the avoidant person might show up like that. Like they might want that intimacy, they might feel a bit safe, but then after a few days, because they did the space and they did the safety, they might pull away. So it might look like amazing, then amazing, then so it might look like that. But there's something I would like us to understand, something we call the um, anxious avoidant trap. So the anxious avoidant trap is where an anxious person is dating an avoidant person, which happens most of the time. Happens. I'm not saying you can't find an anxious person, but the avoidant person most of the time look physically. Their presentation is someone who's got it together. So because they look like they've gotten it together, and we find that the anxious person is all over, and the fear of abandonment, so they are very attractive for the anxious person. So most of the time, not all the time, most of the time they get together. So when they get together, they go through an interesting trap, which may look like this avoidant person gets to a place where they need the space. Tunakumbuka ile space wanahitaji. So when they get to that place where they just need to be alone. The anxious person and I feel like something is wrong. So they feel they need to stir up or do something interesting so that they can get the attention. So they might even start a fight from something very basic. Kitu tu. So when they start a fight, they go all in. Mnakumbuka ni blogger, so my message, my phone calls, back to back. So the more they do this, the more the avoidant person pulls back, because now they are threatened, they are uncomfortable, and they can't take it. So when the anxious person realizes this is not working, they get to a place and they stop. They realize, oh my God, why am I sending this text? And it's only 7 a.m. So they start maybe apologizing. They can do this by getting these individual gifts, by texting nice things, by buying them or cooking them favorite meals. They just try to like reconcile, because they've realized, I think I acted in a way that was out of character. So when they do this, the avoidant person is like, okay. So they reconcile. When they reconcile, they have a few days, a few weeks, mambo iko sawa. Then the avoidant person needs space again. The anxious person feels neglected again. So there's that anxious avoidant trap. So until one of the people in this cycle decides that there's something is off, this is not healthy, this is not functional, we need to, I think I need to do something. They examine themselves and start working towards becoming secure. That's when they're able to break the cycle. And you find that these relationships, most of the time, they last long. Mtu anaweza kuambia wamedate 3 years, but kwa hizo 3 years they've been together cumulatively for maybe 4 months because of kuachana kurudiana. It's a quite interesting cycle. Um, so I think I can check the questions. I can listen to the questions before we look at what are the conditions for raising a secure child and how can we work towards becoming secure adults.
All right. Just a moment. Let me get the question. How can I set my boundaries to stop pleasing people? That is Jesse Wakaba.
To stop what?
To stop people pleasing. How do I set boundaries to stop people pleasing?
Mm,
Another one, maybe if you can note them down. How do you
mm,
explain a partner
mm,
who is quite inconsistent, unpredictable, distant?
mm,
Wow, someone is saying, as a parent, I'm worried how I'm impacting my baby already. But Carol has said she is going to look at that. being a parent is so expensive. You are in charge of how your child feels for decades later. That is true.
Mm, that's true.
Yeah,
Sadly.
gladly or
Mm,
gladly.
yeah, yeah.
I
Depending on.
realize that I have a lot of fear and anxiety. I feel I need help. This one, maybe you can talk to us later and see what kind of support you need. Then there's
Mm,
how can one move to a secure attachment? It's where you're
mm,
coming next.
yeah.
Another one, other than childhood influences to
Mm,
attachments, can attachment style be influenced by adulthood relationships, such as a
mm,
difficult marriage, or the root is always in childhood? So is the root always in childhood, or can these things develop out of difficult life experiences like a difficult marriage?
mm-hmm.
Wow, Tabitha is saying she's been thinking all along she's an introvert. Kube, she could be an avoidant. That is why we are here to learn, Tabitha. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
maybe she's an avoidant, she thinks she's an introvert. Catherine is saying, wow,
Mm,
you nailed it. Relationships suffocate me. It feels emotionally painful. I'm looking,
mm,
yes, there's this one. Uh, how can, yeah, that one is, how can one move? I just pulled out of a very promising romantic relationship. I felt
mm-hmm.
suffocated and I needed a break. The guy is so
Mm,
heartbroken and I don't know what to tell him, why I ghosted
mm,
him. I feel so guilty. This one you need to address. Then let me take the final one. Maybe I can take the others later. Where do you
mm.
categorize a promiscuous man who has no time for family, doesn't want to be questioned or discuss the cheating, doesn't want you to feel emotional over his behaviors?
Okay. Mm,
You have them?
yeah.
All right.
Mm, okay. I don't know. Do I finish then answer the questions because of time?
And maybe you can finish and answer the questions. I
Mm-hmm.
believe by something like 9:30, you could be through.
Sawa. So let me finish with the presentation and then I can answer as much
Maybe
questions
you
as
can
I
answer the questions if possible.
yeah as I'll be able to do. Yeah. So
Oh,
how how do we change these attachment styles to become more to become more secure, rather working towards becoming more secure. Um, or let me start with the one for behavior. They are very similar. So how can we the conditions for raising a secure child? Because I've seen we have a lot of parents. So first, we have five things. So first, we need to ensure that the child feels safe. There's a sense of safety because you've noticed kwa zote there's a huge deep sense of abandonment or fear of abandonment. So there's a lot of fear. So we need to create that safe space. They need to feel safe with us. The child needs to be seen. So this may look like understanding their cues. So understanding their cues, I'll give sometimes okay, let me I don't know if that might apply, but I remember my second born when he got to around 8 9 months alikuwa anasumbuka sana na kifua homa. So I remember I had a nurse friend, so I remember telling her mi naona kama he's called Miles, nikamwambia mi naona kama Miles ako na sore throat, and she was like, how do you know a child has a sore throat? Nikamwambia vile analia nasikia sauti yake iko a bit different today because you can imagine he's like 7 months, so si ati ni mtoto anaongea. And when we went to the hospital, ukweli yenyewe akichekiwa he had the nini was inflamed. So this you have to be so in tune with your child so that you can even pick their cues even without them communicating. Because sometimes they don't have the vocabularies, they don't have the emotional capability to communicate some things, and they rely on you. So that's how it looks like. They need to be seen and known. It even as an adult, kama hauko poa alafu mtu anotice without you tell. There's that feeling. Of course, we say it's good to communicate, but sometimes you don't have the vocabulary or the emotional capability to communicate. So you can imagine in a child who's still developing. So they need to be seen and known. And then you need to comfort them and invite them. They need literally, opening your arms to them. They need to feel like, those arms are open for me in case of anything. That's why in adulthood we wonder, yani huyu mtoto amekuwa akipitia hizi vitu na hajatuambia. It's because when they were younger, the arms were not open for them. So they need to know that I can, run to those arms. I can talk to my parent anytime. I can talk to them anytime. Also, the fourth one, they need to be valued. So this one is very important because they need to be valued unconditionally for who the child is rather than what the child does, because this is very crucial. Because there's something, when you're looking at the self concept, there's something we call the conditions of worth. So the conditions of worth ni hizi zenye huwa tunasema mwanaume kijana afai kulia, msichana anafaa, those things that we condition people. So when we condition our children that they are only a good boy or a good girl when they do this, they start feeling like I have to do something so that I can be loved. And this I can tie with the question for setting boundaries. For that person who's struggling with setting boundaries and stop people pleasing, you have to like go back and check the conditions of worth, and you can get this by the help of maybe a life coach or a therapist, so that you can check, so what conditions of worth do I operate from? Because ideally we are worthy of being human beings. We are worthy of love. We are worthy of belonging, even without having to do anything. But since our society and our socialization and the social construct, it says otherwise, and then we struggle with it in adulthood. So a child needs to be seen for who they are rather than what they do. So unconditionally, they know that they have value in this house. Whether aende akuja amekuwa number 1 ama akuja akiwa number 55, they are still of value. Yeah. Then the last one is we should promote the authentic self for the child. So there's something I would like to insist on this point, and this is something I would really like all of us to take home. When a child is loved properly, when they feel secure and loved, they explore, they're curious, and they play. I know we say casually, mtoto anacheza huo si mgonjwa, ako sawa, they're healthy. So we need to promote the authentic self of a child. How do we promote by this? They need to feel the love. They need to feel safe. So when they feel safe, it's easy for them to play. It's easy for them to be curious and ask questions. It's easy for them to explore who they are. I remember my dad used to tell us ati anakuwa na ile tape, ile kitambo walikuwa na tape sister yangu mwenye ananifuata akiuliza hii ni nini na nini na nini, like so my dad would talk about it as hey, it was a lot. This child spoke very soon na alikuwa tu anashinda ni nini hii na ni nini na hii ni ya nini. But now as an adult we realize that that's a very healthy baby, because there was an environment for her to ask questions. So when a child is loved, when a child feels safe, they explore, they play, and they are curious. So how to conditions for raising a secure child for people who are raising children and people who are intending to become parents or uncles, aunties, caregivers in whatever capacity. So how to change, I'll go through this quite fast so that I can be able to answer the questions. So how do we change the attachment styles? So first, it's very important for us to identify our relationships. For example, like how are we towards, like how were they towards you, like in this relationship? So you start assessing yourself in this first relationship, in this friendship, this, so how are they towards you? Then the second one is how do you respond to these people? Do I respond by pushing my boundaries? Do I respond by being a people pleaser? Do I shut off? Do I emotionally shut off? How do I show up? So to whom do you go for when you have a problem, when you need to be comforted? Because even for the people who isolate themselves, they have that person who is a safe space for them. So the people around you, are they reliable? So this portion is just to fill in for people who are still questioning how their how they show up, how the attachment styles are. So after you've gained this clarity and seen these patterns, now we go towards working on our self-esteem and are reaffirming ourselves. So you remember I've mentioned the conditions of worth. I've mentioned that when you go through the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that we all crave love and belonging. We crave that belonging, and it influences how we attach and how we show up. So once you build your self-esteem, and for you to build your self-esteem, you have to go for that person who said you have to take care of your children and still take care of yourself. You have to go back and realize, where was my self-esteem messed up? Where did it start? So reaffirming yourself, you have to go back to that place. Also, you have to get in touch. You have to be very introspective and get in touch with your own needs. You see these questions that we had, how do I show up? How do they show up? How do they respond to me? Whom do I go to? All those questions. You have to be really, really introspective. And in this bit, I'd like to mention something. It's very important for us not to be, and I think Coach Paps said the same thing, but maybe in a different way. We have to be very careful not to be victims. Because if you feel like, hey, this is what my caregivers did, ndio maana relationships, no wonder I'm 29 akina bado sina mtu. If you take that route, you'll never do the work. You need to get to a place where you decide, this is what my caregivers did for whatever reason, whether it's the transgenerational transmitted trauma and pathologies that they have, or maybe you've been raised by a parent who was struggling with alcoholism or struggling with abandonment issues themselves, all these things, or they were in a lot of pain and bitterness that they never resolved, or trauma from anything, whatever. You need to get to a place where you take charge. You need to get to a place where you realize, by the way, I really have to do the work. So as you're working on yourself, it's very, very key that as you extend empathy and kindness to yourself, as people who support you and extend kindness and empathy to yourself, to you, it's very important for you not to view yourself as a victim. Because if you view yourself as a victim, you never take responsibility. And the journey to becoming, the journey of awareness requires a lot of responsibility. Yes. So let me go through the question. Let me answer a few questions. Naona nimefunga where I've written them, but there's someone who asked about a husband and where to place him. I don't know. I'm not sure if I have enough context to be able to respond to that. But from what it looks like, the promiscuity, no room for, for family, does not allow the spouse to be sad or express themselves or feel sad about the consequences of their actions. This is beyond the attachment style. This is an individual who does not want to take accountability. And since I don't have much context, I cannot say much. But what I'd say is that for the wife or for the partner who posted this, for someone who, if you are with someone who is not transparent and does not take accountability, your responsibility is to ensure that they are able to experience the consequences of their own actions. Because every time you allow them not to be accountable, by allowing them, I mean, there's no repercussion for them not being accountable. You actually become a player. You're reinforcing bad behavior. So with this context, small context, it's important for you to take a stand so that they can be able to suffer the consequences of their own actions. And until then, they may never be able to take accountability. So I hope I've answered your question. For the individual who said that she was feeling ghosted and she was feeling suffocated, sorry, and ghosted the partner, it's important that you extend empathy and maybe explain to this individual that I was feeling suffocated. It's okay if you don't want to work through the relationship. It's okay. But also maybe it would be important for you to just communicate to this person, by the way, this is what has made me pull back. Because also ghosting is a form of I'm sorry, I don't have a better word, but emotional, not being emotionally mature. Because there's something that's scaring you, there's something that's making you uncomfortable, and instead of communicating that and either finding a solution or communicating that, by the way, I'm leaving this relationship because A, B, C, and D, you just decide to leave it at that and close that book. So it might also signify something deeper than just the ghosting. It might signify that you are not able to also handle your own emotions. So it's easier for you to shut them down and dissociate and just put them in a box and store it away. So there's room for more introspection, but it would be important if you communicated that you are feeling suffocated. Um, what other question? A partner who is inconsistent, a partner who is um, distant. So there's something I would like to, I've insisted on us taking responsibility for our own personal journey. So it's also very important that also the other people, we are not responsible for their own journey. As I said, if this person is already working towards becoming a better human being, you can support them. But support does not mean you taking it in, taking it in. So if a person is not inconsistent, this is where you place your values on the table, you place your non-negotiables and negotiables on the table, and actually communicate and say, this is hurting me, I cannot take it. So that either they'll do the work or, you there's a consequence of we cannot work like this. It's not healthy for me, it's not working for me. That's a sign of also setting healthy boundaries between yourself, within yourself, sorry. Mm. I think I responded to the setting boundary and stopping people pleasing as I was explaining the last bit. Yeah, I think I've explained most of them. I've answered most of the question, Ruth.
All right, Carol.
Mm.
Let me come back on screen. I like what you have said because sometimes when you're in a difficult relationship, you are looking. A lot of us will look for reasons to justify why the other person is behaving the way they are behaving. And the moment you get something, oh, he's avoidant. So now you sit back, you allow them to do all the stuff because oh, they're avoidant, oh, there's nothing they can, they're dismissive, they're I like Carol has said,
Mm.
the person needs to be taking responsibility for their life, their emotions, their action, and all that stuff. So, in a situation where someone is not taking responsibility, doesn't want to get better, doesn't want to
Mm.
make the relationship better, then don't just sit there and justify, you know, an uncomfortable
And then,
relationship, a relationship that's making you anxious. Yes.
yeah. No, I was saying, and be an enabler because once
Yes,
you allow
become an
that,
enabler.
you become
Yeah,
an
become an
enabler.
enabler and allow that.
Mm.
So everybody needs to be taking responsibility to make the relationship responsibility over themselves so that the relationship can get better. If
True.
that is what I heard you say.
Yes, yes, yes.
Someone is saying, can someone have both anxious and avoidant styles?
Yeah, I explained in the last one, the fourth one, it's a combination. It's called disorganized. The last one that I explained.
Disorganized.
Yeah, it's the disorganized.
Uh,
Mm.
I think Esther is continuing with the question she had asked about the partner who refuses to take responsibility. Whenever I bring him to book over his promiscuous behavior, he will shout at me, talk with loud voices that he embarrasses me, and tells you to do what you want. Fanya vile unataka. What would you tell her?
That's emotional abuse, and there's probably more to, I can imagine there's more to it than that. And my answer is still the same. At some, not not making a decision is also a decision. So if I'm at a place where me I don't want to stay because you're cheating, but then I don't know what to do. That in between place is also a decision that you've made. So as hard and as harsh as it sounds, she need to get to a place where um I can take this, so I'm gonna stay with it and deal with it and knowing the consequences of the person she's gonna become. I remember there's a question I didn't answer. The person that she's going to become consequently, or decide that this is not for me. So ideally, as counselors, we will not talk about someone leaving or staying, but there's a decision that you have to make. It may not be good for you at that moment in time, but you look in the long run. Is this something would future me would what's her name, Esther?
Hmm.
So would the future Esther 2 years from now thank her for the decisions that she's making right now, accepting and staying with these current conditions? Would the future her thank her for that? What would she say? 2 years from now, what would Esther say to her?
Would
Hmm.
she be proud of her decision today?
Mm,
Judy is asking, I'm very interactive in public spaces, but prefer my space indoors. I
mm,
actually have no close friends, but a few acquaintances. I desire to have close friends, but I don't know how. How do I stop?
mm. Okay. There's nothing wrong. I'd like to point out there's nothing wrong with someone needing me time. Personally, that's how I recharge. There's nothing wrong with that. But having no friends, I think Coach Paps explained it very well yesterday. Those two circles for the intimate circle for those like the do or die, the ride or die. Then the outer cycle and the most outer circle. And chances are maybe she does not get to have intimate relationships and friendships because she's afraid it might hurt. So she has to get to a place where she has to allow herself to be vulnerable and to open up herself to the possibility of having these friendships and thrive and growing them. But before she gets to that place, she needs to understand does this come? Is it from fear? What is it rooted in? Why do I show up? Like, why do I not show up? And why do I not? I want the friendships, but there's something that holds me back. So she has to assess that. There's a question I realized I didn't answer. Somebody asked, is it necessarily pegged on um, our caregivers? No, a larger percentage comes from our caregivers, right? Because we learn from our environment, modeling, and all that. But it's true. There are some adult relationships that may trigger something within us. There's some you might be secure, but you get into a relationship that maybe you stay in it for long and it does a number on you, and all of a sudden you're very anxious and you're showing up as an anxious attachment person. So yes, some adult relationships can actually trigger that.
All right. The final
Mm.
question. I don't easily accept affection unless I am the one interested and I pursue. What complex
Mm.
would that be?
And that's quite avoidant because of the need for control. They want to pursue so that they can be in control, and they need to be in control so that they can control the outcome.
So there's
Mm.
something that they need to look into.
Yeah, there's something. Why do they need to control? What is the fear? Because most likely it's rooted in fear. Why do you feel they need to control the outcome?
There's a fear somewhere in the background.
Mm.
I saw a question about sexual abuse. I have decided not to read it and I have decided not to talk the person out because this is a public forum. So the person who put in a
Okay.
question on sexual abuse, please come into our inbox. Let's have that conversation there. This is a public space. I don't think
Okay.
it would be very safe to talk about it here.
Okay.
So as we come to the close, let's put in the
Mm.
chat what we have learned. As Carol summarizes, you want to say something, Carol, as you close, even as you tell us where you have found your social handles, what you do, where can these wonderful
Mm.
people find you?
Okay. My social handles are Waidira Maura. Waidira with a I. Waidira Maura. I also have a YouTube channel called Candid Conversations with Caroline and Chris, where we discuss mental health. So these are ways that you can reach me. And for those who want to reach me for therapy, they can inbox me so that maybe we can book for a session. Yeah.
Would you want to share your contacts or they come to Messenger?
No, I can share my contact. It's
Yes,
okay.
you share your contact.
Yeah.
Let me say it, I type it for you.
Okay, 0713 77 6752.
So if someone wants to have a conversation with you, they come to that number. You're able to help them address their issues.
Mm.
So, ladies, as we come to a close, I think I would love to know what you learned tonight. These have been two very wonderful evenings. Let's hear what you have learned, especially from tonight's session. For those who are asking about the recording, This is live on YouTube. So if you use the same link that you used to access, tomorrow you'll be able to access the whole of this session out there. So if you have come in late and you missed something, then I believe you will be able to rewatch it tomorrow through the same link. So I want to know how your experience have been. They're asking what's your YouTube handle.
Oh, candid conversations with Caroline and Chris.
Candid conversations. Maybe you can put it in the comment, Carol. Candid conversations with Caroline and Chris. There is a lot of C. Candid conversation with Caroline and Chris. 4 C's. So for your easier remembrance, but you can put it in the comments.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you want to hear these candid conversations, I love how Carol handles the topic of attachment styles. My greatest takeaway today has been caregivers regulate
Mm,
us emotionally or regulate children emotionally. And when I think about that statement, I feel very sad because how many of us ask children, unalia nini?
and they really they tick you off kabisa. Unashindwa vile uko na stress mingi and this child is depending on you to regulate them emotionally.
So instead of regulating your child emotionally, you're getting triggered,
Yeah.
which is very sad because we are parenting for, you said we are parenting for our own traumas.
Yeah, we are parenting ourselves and we have to parent them. There's a book that's quite triggering that is quite good on this topic about regulating ourselves, and it's called the book You Wish Your Parents, the book You Wish Your Parents Had Read.
Or there's the book I wish my parents had read.
Let me let me check if I have it here or if it's in the book.
She brings the book. Think about the damage that you do when you're telling nyamaza, unalia
Mm.
nini? Ulikuwa ukigonga ukifanya nini?
It's,
Nimekukataza mara
it's
ngapi kukimbia kama unaenda jikoni? Yes.
unaangalia mbele.
Unatembea
So it's
umeangalia juu.
so it's the book you wish your parents had read, and your children will be glad that you did.
The book you wish you can you put it like this? We see whether we can see it. Oh, it's a physical book. The
Yeah, it's a
book
piece.
you wish, hold it nicely. The book you wish your parents had read, and your children will thank you that you read.
Yeah, and
So
the
the book
children
you
will,
wish your
will
parents had read. So that's a book you'll be
yeah,
glad
that's the
that I
book.
read, eh?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go get that book that our children will wish we had read so that we can
And then
understand how to raise secure
mm,
children and how to deal with this
mm,
our attachment style stuff.
mm.
So I don't know. You can put in the comment section what you have learned. We still have one more night. I know these have been amazing sessions and we wish we could do this every evening. But tomorrow I will talk about a forum where you can be accessing this kind of content and where we can be meeting regularly to engage and to learn and relearn and unlearn. So if you're here for the first time today, there we had a session yesterday. The same YouTube link that you were supposed to access the forum through is the one that you will use so that you can see what we did yesterday. So if you've come in late today, same thing. The YouTube link that you used to come here is the same one that you will use to access today's session. So unless there's someone with a burning question, people are asking for the author of the book.
Oh, the author Philippa Perry.
Philippa Perry. Perry is Prry or Pri.
P P-E-R-R-Y.
Perry. So Philippa Perry, that's the author of the book. So you can go and look for that book. So let me know what you have learned tonight. Put it in the chat, even as we say goodnight. Thank you so much, Carol. It's always a pleasure to have you here. It's always a pleasure to do this with us. Oh,
Mm.
sometimes I wish we could do this forever, but I know we can't.
Yeah.
So if you
Thank you
want to
for
see
having
more of us, yes, thank you,
yeah.
Carol. If you want to see more of us, if you want to have more of our content, please come to our forums. Follow Carol, go to her candid conversations with Caroline and Chris. You will see a lot about attachment styles. If you want to get in touch with her, she's given us her contact. So it's really a pleasure. Thank you for showing up. I am looking forward to tomorrow. Tomorrow, I'm the one who will be dealing with healing. I want us to understand the importance of healing. So let's show up tomorrow here, same time, 8 p.m. We shall post the links for you so that you are here to learn more and learn and relearn. So enjoy your evening. Have a great night. Let's know what you, as you go away, put it in the chat so that we know what you have learned and taken away from this session. Thank you very much. Have a blessed night.